Okay, welcome to Box Check. This is a 2007 Volvo S80, and today what we're going to be doing is replacing the upper radiator hose. Here's a shot of the new hose, and as you can see, it has very unique ends on it, as well as a specific shape. So I do recommend, if you're doing this job, get the direct replacement. As long as you get the direct replacement, this is actually quite easy, and you can do this from your driveway without a lot of specialty tools. So stay with me. We'll walk through the entire process step by step. Okay, so to begin with, your easiest access to do this job is to remove the front passenger side headlight. In order to do that, Volvo's made this really easy. It's just two metal pins. They kind of look like stakes. You pull those out, you can wiggle the headlight out and disconnect the plug, and boom, there you go. There's your void. Now, another thing that you'll find you'll need to do is this power steering reservoir. You can wiggle that out of its little clip that it's hanging on to, and you can move that up. You can move it down and a little bit to the left and right in order to get your arms in there and things like that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to snake the camera in, and I'm going to give you a shot of what this upper radiator hose looks like as it's connected to the engine. And this is actually our point of failure. This is why we're having to do this job. It's actually severed right there. So this is rigid plastic that fits over a tapered neck. And that little metal locking clip, that goes into a slot and keeps it locked on. That's kind of how this works. But that rigid plastic is cracked all the way through, and there's a little bit of a separation occurring now, and we're losing coolant. So that's the reason we're having to replace this one. Now what I'm going to do is back the camera out, and I want to show you what this upper radiator hose looks like connected to the radiator. And it's the same, kind of end. It's just the other side. So rigid plastic goes over a tapered neck, metal locking clip. This is what it looks like from the overhead view if you're looking down. And just real quick before we get started actually doing this job, the first thing I recommend you doing is take a couple photos before you start removing the plumbing. Because what you'll find is an hour later, 2 hours later, or however long it takes you, you'll kind of become a little bit lost in terms of like where it was routed. And this, as you can see, is a special shape. It's got to go a certain way. Okay, so now let's get started replacing this upper radiator hose. So the first thing I did was I used a hook end pick, and what I did was I just grabbed a hold of that metal clip and I just pulled it up. And as you pull it up, you'll hear it or feel it kind of snap, and you know that it's disengaged. But really, you kind of need this thing all the way off. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a flathead screwdriver, and I'm just going to pry one of the ends off. Now watch your eyes, because this thing is kind of like a spring and it will go flying. But I'm just removing these, and I do that to the front and then also the back where it's connected into the engine. And the reason why is you just don't need them there anymore. I mean, you're going to have to wrap your hand around the whole neck to work this thing off. So just get those out of your way. They're easy enough to put back on if you had to. Okay, so now what you're going to see me doing is using a flathead screwdriver, and I'm just kind of working it between where this connection point is. I am not prying anything because I don't want to crack any plastic. I don't want to crack my plastic neck for the radiator or the engine or what have you, but all I'm doing is just breaking the seal. So I'm just going to kind of work it around, give it a little wiggle, and that's it. No prying. Okay, now just get creative. I used a mixture of just my left arm, kind of twisting and pulling, and then my right hand, I had a longer screwdriver that I'm just trying to give it a little bit of an assist, but whatever it takes to get this thing loose. But once you do get it loose, this is the sound we're looking for. We've got it disconnected at this point, and I forgot to mention I do have a drain pan under there because I knew I'd be catching this coolant that would be coming out. It was a little bit easier to remove the front versus the back. So that's why I did the front first. Just go ahead and do that one, get the coolant drained from there. That way it's not all over my engine. Okay, now that the front's disconnected, it's time to work on the rear portion where it's connected into the engine. And this is a little bit more challenging. The reason it's challenging is you can really only get one hand in there. I tried my best to snake my hand through any crevice I could, but I could only get one hand back there to actually grab the hose or the end. And ultimately, I ended up just ripping it completely all the way off from that severed point where it was. So here's a shot. I'm just, I'm pulling that remaining part out. That's kind of what it looks like, this old one. But the problem is the other part of that severed end, the rigid plastic, the other half of that is still on that neck. I tried, every flathead screwdriver I had, I'm pretty sure, and every technique I could. Now, ultimately, I've spared you. It took me 10 minutes, by the way. In editing this video, I realized I'd worked on just the rear part for 10 full minutes. I ended up turning the camera off because it was looking like it was going to take a lot longer. But what I ended up doing was actually using a larger tool for encouragement. Again, it's not on video, I'm sorry, but this is what I used. Not a recommendation, but I didn't put a lot of force on it. It was just enough to encourage that thing to break loose. So that's what I used. But now that I have the remaining portion off, this is kind of what it looks like, what it would have looked like as one unit. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set the old one down the way that it came off, and then get the new one oriented. I want to make sure I'm putting it on the correct way, because it looks really similar, but one side is a little bit longer than the other after the bend. So I flip this around, and now I'm going to show you kind of how this metal clip works. So there's a view inside of the hose. You can see that the metal clip is engaged, and those two sides of metal would be also engaged into a slot, actually. Once you pull that up, you can see that it's open now, and that's how you would either install or remove this hose. And this is the slot that it engages in. You can see the tip of my pick. I've got it in that slot that kind of goes all the way around. Another thing to note is on this, if you look in there, there's actually kind of like a keyway. This, again, it's a custom part for this specific Volvo, and it goes on a certain way. Just something to note. All right, so now let's get this thing in, and again, reference your photos when you're routing this thing in. Now, the way this one was routed, it went between the two power steering reservoir hoses. There's two hoses coming off the power steering reservoir. It went between those, but in behind the oil dipstick. Once I get this thing routed, I'm actually going to connect the front part, the end that goes to the radiator first. And once I'm confident this thing is fully engaged, that's when I will push down the locking clip. And you just want to make sure that none of the sides of the locking clip are bulging out. If it's bulging out, it means that it's not all the way on, or something's not lined up. But get that front clip locked in, and the rear, now it's time to attach the rear where it's connected to the engine. Now, I will go ahead and say this was more challenging than connecting to the radiator. Again, something I didn't get on film. This probably took me another 10 minutes. Just really, really difficult because you're only working with one hand. I did end up having to use that encouragement tool again, just to bump that thing forward, just so it can get on there all the way enough to where that I can gauge that locking pin. Okay, now that we have both ends connected, what we're going to do is we're going to get the power steering reservoir clip back in place, and we're going to fill this coolant reservoir with coolant. I used a 50-50 mix specific to this Volvo. Once I got the coolant reservoir up to an appropriate level, you're going to crank the engine, turn your heater on high, and just kind of keep an eye on the coolant level, because what's going to happen is, as this thing is working through the engine, you're going to see that coolant level, or at least I did. It lowered some, and the Volvo is pretty sensitive to this. So just keep an eye on that. You'll probably have to add a little bit more because it's filling in those air pockets. But once you get it up to temperature, what we're doing here is just a leak check, just confirming that there's no leaks. And of course, here it is. It's running right now, and I'm peeking the camera in there. No leaks. We're good to go. So I'm going to turn the engine off and reinstall this headlight. Again, it was just super easy. Okay, so that's it. That's how you change the upper radiator hose. Guys, if you found any of this helpful or interesting, give the video a like. It helps small channels like me. And also, if you're interested in videos like this, go to my YouTube channel. I've got 3 different playlists. One of them is DIY vehicle maintenance. I've got a bunch of videos on that, as well as Chinese mini skid steers and mini excavators. So check out my YouTube channel. If it's something you like, watch some of those videos. and consider subscribing. But that's going to do it for this one, guys. As always, thanks for watching.